Yo yo yo, what up dogs? Chris here with another unrelenting tutorial for the Patreon guys. This is a particularly special one. We've got Perturabo, Primarch of the 4th Legion, as Astartes Iron Warriors. Really interesting character. I enjoyed his portrayal in the Siege of Terror books. He was not very likeable, but there were elements of his character which, you know, you resided with a lot. He was obviously very stoic and determined and riddled with needs for vengeance against Dawn, who he had nothing to prove against to anyone but himself. So, hey ho, petulant man-children who are demigods, what are you going to do? Now, painting him's an interesting approach because he is almost entirely metallics. So, to incorporate that, I want to use a very limited palette of silvers, golds and brasses and bronze, with the only non-metallic features on the model being the loincloth and his face. So the face in particular is going to get a lot of love. Otherwise, we're going to make sure that we're going to use the right paint for this job. So without further ado, let's crack-a-thon. So here he is prime black. I'm going to start off with a tiny bit of airbrushing. We're going to go in with one of my favourite combos, which is Metal Colours Burnt Iron for his zenithal all over, followed by a spot highlight of dull aluminium focusing on the centre of the model around his face, his chest, the end of his arms, the end of his legs, all those fun focal points. We've got the slip here from the box for a reference point. I've also got him loaded up on my computer on the Warhammer website, so I can check that when I need to. We're not going to do anything with his base today because, quite honestly, his base is obnoxiously big. It's an Imperial Knight basically cut in half, and we're going to paint that up in House Veroni at a later date. This is for a client, so I want to make sure I obviously get it looking tip-top, and I'm really excited to get him done and sent over. I'm slowly working my way through the list of Primarchs. I've got Alfarius coming up next, the Khan coming later on. If you'd like one of your Primarchs painting, give me a shout. I'll do an absolute steal for a Primarch I've not painted yet, of which there are quite a few. So I'm just getting my paints ready here. I've got my Vallejo Metal Colours mentioned earlier, and I'm otherwise going to be using predominantly Darkstar paints. Darkstar were amazing and sent me one of their paint sets a few months back, and I thought this would be the perfect excuse to crack them all out, show you what they're like. I use them on various projects. I try and avoid them where possible for base layers just because of how bright and pigmented they are. It takes a few layers to get them built up, and I try and use as few paints and as little paint as possible. But for highlights, these are fantastic, so I think this is going to come over really well on Perturabo. Go on then, let's go. So, Burnt Iron from Vallejo Metal Colour through the airbrush. You can just spray him with a silver aerosol if you've got one. Likewise, you can just paint him with a brush or gradually build up a dry brush. It's entirely up to you and what you've got here. But as you can see, I'm focusing on a zenithal, a burnt iron. I'm going to keep some of that black where I want it, but otherwise this is going to be predominantly most of the base colour. So really light gentle passes and dusting with the airbrush. Building it up as I go because these paints are very, very thin. And it instantly brings him to life. And yeah, you can already see just how much of this armour is metallic, and from here you can kind of see what we want the end result to be. I want him to be predominantly metallic, obviously, but I want him to be not gleaming. He's not sanguineous, he's not Dawn, he's not a Custodi, he's not flash and presentable and all about aesthetics. So I want it to be really oily, really grimdark, with a few nice highlights in place where I need them. So onto dull aluminium. This is going to be sprayed around the centre of the model, so around his head, his face, at the ends of the limbs, at the ends of his legs. Again, framing the model nicely where we want the focal point to be the centre where his face is, but also the enormous cannons he's got in his arms, the enormous legs he's got going on top of that knight, and just adding some interest with some brighter silvers. Obviously not forgetting his hammer either. Now my airbrush will need a good clean, which it obviously needs, as you can see once these paints are done, because they are very, very thin. They don't take any thinning. But the pigment in them is fantastic. They are superb through the airbrush. You can brush them on as well, so there's no excuse for you not to pick these paints up. They are wonderful. Right, on to our first base painting with a brush. We've got some Darkstar Brass. I'm going to use this on all the trim. Again, we've got the reference material of the slip that came with the model. We've also got him loaded up on the computer, which I can see off camera. There's going to be several moments during filming where I spot a bit of trim I've missed, or there's a lot of detail that can be interpreted to be trim, which can be silver or like this brassy gold colour. It's very open to interpretation. You can follow the references to a T, or you can mix them up to your own accord. It's entirely up to you. I'll kind of go with the flow as I go. Like I say, there'll be bits where I move on to the next colour and think, oh, I'm going to go back and do that a different colour. It's all about framing the reference and understanding as we go where the balance is. So if I've done too much gold, I'll do some silver instead. If I've done too much silver, I'll add a little bit more gold. Find the balance, you'll get there as you paint. So I'm happy with this at this stage. So that's basically 2 of the 3 main colours down. We're going on to bronze from Darkstar now, and I'm going to do this on his terrages, which hang from his cloth between his legs, and from the armour plates on his shoulders. And again, just another excuse to get a wonderful metallic colour down. These Darkstar paints are really, really nice. They do take a couple of thin layers to get built up to a nice opaque finish, but the metallic finish on them is second to none. They are fantastic. So as you can see, going super fast, getting these filled in. I'll let this layer dry and go back in and tart it up. I'm also going to do the coils on his arm cannons just again to break up all that silver. Pinky balance. There we go. I'm also going to do the massive ammo belts he's got leading from his back to his arm cannons. I am once again using my orange brushes, so thank you very much to the guys at Orange Brushes for sending these out. Discount code UNRELENTING for yourself to get a 10% discount on your own set of orange brushes, which makes them less than 20 quid, and postage is included. Early on until the end of August. Darkstar Steel, this is an exceptionally dark with a faint bit of blue metallic in there. I'm going to use this for what would be a Space Marine's black carapace undersuit. So he's got these webbed, ribbed plates in between his big armor plates, so I'm just going to do this there, just to add a little bit of depth and shadow. And again, keeping the theme with Darkstar, keeping it to almost entirely metallics. And we're just going to pop this in all the places where the armor is segmented with this kind of undersuit. Again, lovely colour. That's pretty much our main colours down. We're going to go on to some non-metallics now. So change your water. We've got some burnt red from Perturabo, which I'm going to do for his loincloth. Don't forget the back of it as well. This is the only fabric on the entire model. This is going to be a nice point of focus for us later as well. But I'll come back to this when I've done the base, because basically the palette of Perturabo is exceptionally neutral. It's all greys and golds and silvers. So it leaves us then to interpret what other colours we want around him. So I want the night to be nice and bright, which is why it's going to be Veroni, which is like a lime green, heavily weathered down and battered because it's been absolutely wrecked. And then the cloth's going to remain quite dark. It's going to remain this really kind of dark burnt red that I'm using. If I need to brighten it up later, once I've done my oil washes and finished all the metallics, I can then balance that to be brighter if I want it to be, or keep it quite low tone, because again, I don't want to detract too much away from the metallic finish in the model. So it's very much a scale. We'll see how we are later on. There we go. Right, let's move on to the handsome chappie's face. We've got pale pink from Proacryl. I want his face to be very, very pale. He doesn't see a lot of sun. He spends a lot of time in his battle barge sulking, so he's not going to have the tanned complexion of some of his brothers. So I want to keep it very, very pallid. And again, it's a focal point. It's the one of 2 bits on the model that isn't metallic, so we want to make it stand out. So this pale pink's really, really nice. It's almost white with a little bit of pink in it. I'm going to do a couple of layers all over his face. Don't worry about being messy. If you get it on the cables around his head, that's fine. I'm going to pick those out later when we get onto highlighting. For the time being, we can afford to be messy. As long as these layers are nice and thin, get them on there. Once that's dry, we're going to give it a shade of Flesh Wash from Proacryl. This is a really great combo for a nice pallid skin tone. It goes on and it looks quite strong and red, but don't worry, it dries nice and subtly and does exactly what we need it to for a nice, easy face. Again, not worrying about those cables because we're going to paint over those later. There we go, make sure we get it in the smile, around his eyes. Make sure we're not missing any bits. Perfect. Zealot Yellow Speed Paint. So there's a few chevrons on the model, of course, with it being Iron Warriors. He's got them around his legs, his arms, his shoulder pads. So I'm just going to paint the whole area, even the black stripes with this, because we're going to go over those later with black. I wasn't sure how this was going to work, because we're going to be hitting this with white spirits and oil paints later. I was worried about it maybe coming off, but I was brave and it all paid off beautifully. So, thankfully these are all sculpted in, so we don't have to faff about with any masking tape or neat lines. We're just going to paint this Zealot Yellow over all those stripes to start off our chevrons. There we go, that's all those done. Again, there'll be bits I see later that I've missed and I'll just go back to them. Black Templar, we're going to use these for the black parts of the chevrons, so we're just going to, as neatly as possible, which admittedly is very awkward when I'm filming around a camera, get those intermittent stripes painted black. Now, if we do mess up, don't stress, we're going to come back to this later. We're going to basically loosely and messily fill in these lines to the neatest capability if we can, which is a lot easier when you're not filming. But if we do make messes and we do overspill, we're going to tidy it up later because we've still got an oil wash to go down, highlights, and at the very end is when you want to tidy up these stripes. So the contrast paint's great because we'll get a slight metallic tint on these stripes and chevrons, which fits the theme wonderfully. There we go, so the shoulders are done, the legs are done. All those base colours are basically finito. Right, time to do some mucky muck. We're going to make an oil wash with burnt umber and lamp black. There's my filthy mixing pot. We've gone half and half black and dark umber, and as soon as I put it on the model I've seen it's way too black. So what I'm going to do is add more of the dark umber to taste. We don't want it to be completely black, we want it to be brown, toned down with black. If we do it all black it'll just be a little bit too dominant. We want to have a little bit of an earthy undertone on there to tie in with, you know, the grimdark aesthetic of the 31st millennium. So more brown added, mix, 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 and then we're basically going to apply this all over. Now, oil paint's fantastic for several reasons. They're ridiculously easy to apply. You thin them down with white spirits and then loosely apply them like this. You can pin wash them onto things that have been gloss varnished. We're not going to bother with that because we don't want to lose our metallic finish here. They're exceptionally time friendly. You've got a lot of working time where you can go back and tidy up, thin it down, add more oils if you want to later on. Incredibly cheap. You can buy these tubes for anywhere between £5 and £10 depending on the size. And I've had these for well over 3-4 years now, and they've still got plenty of life in them. So this is going to flow into those recesses and dirty down our metallic finish ever so slightly. Here you can see it's pretty much virtually dry, and it's done exactly what I want it to do. I don't want it to be luminous, I don't want it to look like the Tin Can Man from Wizard of Oz. I want him to look filled up and grimy with some nice metallic highlights. We're going to push things a bit further now with some AK panel liner for their dark brown. And I'm going to focus this around the legs and the feet because this is where all the muck and detritus of the battlefield, as he stomps about being all moody and sad, is going to develop and sit. So again, you can be quite generous with this because it will dry and dissipate as we need to. We can tidy it up with clean white spirits and a sponge or a cotton bud. I try and avoid cotton buds because they're a little bit abrasive and they can break down. But as long as we're gentle, we don't want to take any of the paintwork off. We don't want to damage any of the resin. We certainly don't want to undo our chevrons or our paintwork so far because then it's a pain in the bum to fix up. So you can be messy, but as long as you're gentle tidying up, you should be absolutely fine to do what you need to do. So again, I'm focusing this around his feet, the bottoms of his legs. There's still a little bit of the spirits that have settled around the bottom that are wet, so this will hit that and flow and dissipate beautifully as we need it to. And it'll give us a really nice subtle transition of filth on the bottom of his legs and his feet up towards his legs where it starts to slow down and dissipate. And again, all this recessed detail and plated armour does all the work we need it to for making this look absolutely wicked. Here we go, those have all dried now. He's looking absolutely dope. I'd almost be tempted to put another oil wash on to turn him down even more, but we're going to stick with as is and go on to highlighting. So back with the Dark Stars, we've got Renaissance Gold here. I'm going to use this to highlight the brassy bits we painted earlier. It's a very nice translucent pale gold, so it highlights this colour beautifully. And we're just going to tickle the edges with the side of a brush, highlight those broader bits of trim gently as we need to with the tip of our brush. And the colour is obviously important when you're highlighting these metallics, but what's more important is the finish, and because of the metallic pigments in these Dark Star paints and how thin they are, the absolute kind of punchiness of the metallic shine is absolutely great. Now we don't want to go overboard, we don't want to do chunky highlights or relayer over what we've done before, we just need this to be the eye-catching glimmer on the very edges of the armour. It translates beautifully onto the model, and it really gives the impression of all those metallic surfaces and the fresh scuffs and damage they'll retain, which then means bright shiny metal shines through and helping him look the absolute part as Big Daddy number 4. So again, we're doing this all over the golden brass pieces, working our way around the whole model. And there we go. Up next we've got pewter, which is quite a bright shiny silver. And we're going to apply this very, very sparingly over all the silver portions of the trim that's not brass, the more prominent cables, and the sharper bits of armor around his armor plates and the shoulder pads. This will be our final highlight for the silver. You could take it higher if you wanted to, but again, I don't want him to be this gleaming metallic, almost angelic figure, because Perturabo certainly wasn't that. We want to have the nice shiny metals, but we don't want to make him look angelic or kind of like a good guy, basically. We want to retain the grime, dirty filthiness, while also ensuring we're not losing a metallic finish by getting that. So again, the edge of my brush, really sparingly, tickling those edges. It doesn't translate massively on photographs, it translates better on film, but I assure you, if you see this model in person or see these Darkstar paints used on models in person, the effect is absolutely dope. It looks really, really good. Now this is the bit of the model that's going to take the most time, because obviously he's almost entirely metallic. But take your time, go over all the elements, then we get the hammer, the arm guns, the back of him. There's a lot of sculpted detail that you can pick out with this. The armor panels on his legs are also really, really great. There's a lot of really subtle raised trim around his armor panels, which you can just tickle this with. And it does do a lot of work in making him look the absolute part. Giant metal monster that he is. So as you can see, I'm being neat-ish. I'm just ensuring I'm tickling all the surfaces, so that we get that really nice point of shiny, gleamy metal goodness that we want to convey on all these metallic surfaces. That is Perturabo's body armor. I'm also going to tickle the lenses on top of those little doodads on top of him, as we'll come back later with those, and just drop a bit of red contrast in there, probably Blood Angel's red, and that will do for them. I'm also going to tickle the wires around his face. We're going back to bronze, and we're just going to tickle the bronze bits we did before, the turrets around his groin and his shoulder. I didn't want to add anything else here, because I think the silver and the brass are bright enough. Maintaining this as being like a dark/neutral bronzy browny colour, I think does more for the model. There's no point upping this to like a copper or a silver, because it will just get lost in all the metallics. Ensuring we've got our different levels of texture and brightness and volume across what we are painting. Again, not forgetting about the little coils on his guns, because otherwise his arms are entirely silver and we don't really want that. But again, it's entirely up to you. You paint your Perturabo however you want to paint him. It is very much up to you and the references you've got and what you want to do. If you want to paint Mr. Blobby Perturabo with pink and yellow polka dots, you crack it on. Post it in Crusade and Heresy, and I look forward to the aftermath. And again, really just tickling those ammo belts. I decided to do a couple of pipes and stuff on his back in this colour as well. That'll do. Back to our pale flesh, I'm going to highlight the face. Now the face did catch some of that wash we put on it earlier. Absolutely fine, it's not how much of an impact. And we're just going to tickle his nose, his brow, his cheeks and his lips. And this will just give us that nice sharp facial highlight, which again focuses on it being an important part of the model. Very, very centred to the mass, and the one thing that would recognise him as being semi-human. From here, you could add a little bit of bone or white to this and up it for another highlight. I'm probably going to do that later. But for the time being, for the purpose of this tutorial, it's going to look fine with just this little touch up here. If there's bits in between the cables you can get to for a little highlight, go for it. Avalanche Sunset Air. Using the air paints with a brush is absolutely fine, especially for thin colours and yellow. So we're just going to use these to fix our stripes earlier. We're going to go up to the recesses where our wash has settled and not go further, because we want to retain those recesses and that muck we put in already. And as you can see, it brightens those up nicely. It tidies up any mistakes we had earlier with the black. Bish, bash, bosh. So again, keep them central. Don't go into those recesses where we've applied our oils and such. Tidy up the black with some black Templar or Black Legion as you need to, and there you go. He is done. Really, really awesome model. Really, really cool character. He's the guy you love to hate and pretty much roll your eyes every time he says something in the Heresy. But great model, superb work from the guys over at Forge World, and enjoyed the paint. I said earlier we'll be doing the night base later on. He's going to be House Veroni, because I think that nice bright green is going to contrast really, really well, make him be a really nice standout centerpiece model. But otherwise, there you go. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Thank you very much for subbing, watching. All likes and comments are hugely appreciated. The next Primarch will be in a week or two. That's going to be Alfarius, which is a similar metallic scheme, but with like lots of nice pearlescent blues and greens, which are going to be fun. If there's any Primarchs you'd like to see me paint, leave a comment. If there's any Rangers or anything else you'd like to see me focus on for its own video tutorial, leave a comment. I'd love to hear it. Otherwise, thank you very much. Have a great weekend. Peace!